Our third speaker this afternoon is Dr. Jane Faily, and I don't have to tell you very much about her capabilities as a speaker. For those of you who were here last night, you have had the pleasure of hearing her. So Jane, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to have her come and talk to us about the family, a refuge, and a workshop. Jane?
Thank you. Well, friends, it seems as though if we have a conference on marriage and the family, it's a little bit like instead of going sightseeing and looking at beautiful pictures and architectural structures and so on, we're going on a guided tour through the rubble of a destroyed institution. And what happens is that we recite to each other the tragic consequences of the breakdown of marriage and family unity. You know, the lost children, the lonely ladies, the vulnerable men, the harvest of bitterness and aloneness that is inevitable. And then we begin to look for the causes, thinking if we could find out why all this happened, we could set it right. And really, the sociologists do their job. They tell us that roles are changing, that women are going out to work, that since there's more money, women are leaving unions that they never liked anyway, but they were hungry enough to stay inside. Now they can earn money. We get all of these reasons. And I would like as an outset to say what my point of view is on that. And that is, as a Baha'i, I believe that the institution of marriage is in a state of disintegration because a new civilization is being born on the words of Baha'u'llah, the messenger of God for today. Baha'u'llah wrote a primal tablet, a very powerful tablet, in which he described a dialogue between earth and heaven. This is the tablet of Carmel. And in that, earth cries out the following: "Separation from thee, O source of everlasting life, hath well nigh consumed me, and my remoteness from thy presence hath burned away my soul." This is the condition of humanity and all human institutions at the time of the end of a religious dispensation. Rootedness in human life and institutions depends on being founded and connected to the will of the Creator. When that connection is broken, chaos ensues. The family is not the only institution that is in despair. It is inevitable that that should be its situation. When Abdu'l-Baha wrote The Secret of Divine Civilization, he described the virtues of government. They should protect the poorer classes. They should adjust the difficult affairs of social life in order to bring honor, justice, prosperity, stability. Find me that government. Government is also in a state of collapse. Art and music were described. They should uplift the human soul. They should bring solace and comfort and peace. Well, if you can find a soundtrack like that on any AM radio, call me immediately. Our art and music, for the most part, reflect frustration and despair and agitation. The press, Baha'u'llah wrote, saying what newspapers should be, and they should be the vehicle of truth. Well, compare that with what we have, and you will see that all human institutions are in disorder. Then, in this same tablet of Carmel, we find these words: "And when the hour at which thy resistless faith was made manifest did strike, thou didst breathe a breath of thy spirit into thy pen, and lo, the entire creation shook to its very foundations. unveiling to mankind such mysteries as lay hidden within the treasuries of him who is the possessor of all created things. This is one statement, and there are many more, that the pen of the messenger of God, the pen of Baha'u'llah, brought into being a new creation. He created anew the soul of man and its spiritual potential. He created anew the institution of the family and of government and of art and music and of the press. Now that helps me think what we are concerned with here today. It says, in his pen he unveils to mankind such mysteries as lay hidden within the treasuries of God. Well, it is our purpose, those of us who are scientists, everybody in the room, to find that hidden mystery. Because there is a new institution of marriage and the family created by Baha'u'llah, and we are all journeying towards it. We are all explorers looking for it. The trouble of the institution is obvious. It is embedded in values remote from God. And we are, according to the House of Justice, passing through the dark heart of the age of transition. We are supposed to come out of that rubble, shake off the ashes, and build something new. And what we can do together is share whatever knowledge and experience we have about this institution. Now, what is marriage? I would like to begin with the words of Baha'u'llah. When he desired to manifest grace and beneficence to men and to set the world in order, he created observances and created laws. Among them he established the law of marriage, made it as a fortress for well-being and salvation. We already know something about this institution. It is an evidence, an expression of the grace and beneficence of God. Its purpose is order. It is to create order. It is for us a fortress for well-being. It is an assistance to ourselves. That means it has a personal good for us as individuals. It has a social good to contribute to civilization. And because we are sojourners in this life, it has spiritual blessings which will give something to our souls, which they will experience throughout eternity. So we know we are looking at an important institution, something founded in the Word of God, which we need. Now, I say a refuge and a workshop because in human life, the laws of God tell us to perform work, to perform worship, to have family life. And in pursuing those things, we have to solve practical problems. We have to confront our own nature. We have to divest ourselves of vain imaginings and idle fancies. It is a workshop in which we find the bounties which God has planned for us to be inevitably part of human life. It is a refuge. We live in one of the most trying times in history, a time of social chaos, corruption, loneliness, decadence. We need a place to be safe. We need an experience of individual order and of love. The laws of Baha'i marriage help us to create that refuge. Now, Baha'u'llah tells us something interesting. He says that in the history of religion, a messenger comes and gives a message. He gives us the law of God. He gives us spiritual truth. He speaks of virtues which do not exist. Well, let's think of our own time. Baha'u'llah speaks of love, of justice, of humility. To people shaped in a civilization where those things are lost. In the Kitab-i-Igan, Baha'u'llah said that the quality of patience came into the world of being because of the deeds of the dawnbreakers. It had disappeared from human society. The dawnbreakers who accepted martyrdom, who forgave treachery and cruelty and conspiracy, brought into being, into the world of human civilization, the quality of patience. Now, when we read and study the laws for marriage and family life, we are also to bring into being spiritual realities, family unity, the equality of men and women, the balance between love and justice, the right training of children, a family unit which contributes to social order, a family which is rightly in relationship with its civilization. We have to bring into being qualities which no longer exist. Now, that is our challenge. Well, what is necessary for family unity, for marriage? It requires unity between men and women. It is to be a place for the training of women and for the training of children. And I think I'm in high gear. You know, the crazy thing about this talk is I don't know enough about it to satisfy me. And at the same time, I have too much to say to fit into my time. I don't know how that happened. Okay. Unity between men and women, training of children, and also it is to support a new society. And every family requires for its stability, its peace, its goodness, a certain kind of support from society. Those three things have to happen. All of them have to be recreated. You know, in the past there was some stability and some harmony, but we cannot go backwards. I think, thinking of the relationship between men and women, in a way it's like a dance. You know, the relationship between these two othernesses that somehow have to cooperate. In the past, it was the dominance of men and the compliance of women. And in a stable order where centuries passed, some grace, some dignity, some harmony developed between those roles. That is gone. We are in an awkward age. We have to recreate that grace, but we cannot go backwards. Well, let's look at the union between men and women, which is one of the ingredients for the family. Men and women are different. They are different biologically, intellectually, and emotionally. And this is the creation of God. Biologically, woman is specially shaped and designed for childbearing. Not only her reproductive organs, also the sort of strength she has. Everybody's crazy about running these days. In the process of figuring out why women runners don't get such a benefit from eating high protein diet, they found out women who are much stronger over long periods, they can endure over time. They can run a marathon and say at the end, when's the next one? They feel good at the end of long endurance. They do that by metabolizing fat instead of protein. Men are much stronger physically, especially in a short run. They can always do something powerful over a relatively brief period of time in That's their kind of strength. These are two different sorts of strength. And the woman's sort enables her to protect infants when food is scarce or when she's sick or when she's cold. She can last a long time. In nurseries, in all different cultures, men and women begin differently intellectually. Little boys start manipulating objects and doing things. They build. They are outward directed and they are more aggressive. Little girls are quicker to learn language, to talk to each other, and to develop social relationships. So there are these differences. Now, if God created us, if we are different physically, if our sexual expression is different, intellectually and emotionally, the first thing we want to believe is that this is a blessing. And the finding of a harmony between these two different natures will create a unity which is richer and finer than if we were the same. So we want to accept the differences and look for what Baha'u'llah said is there, mysteries being revealed in this new creation. Never before in history have these two natures been summoned to equality. They are now to build a family based on equality. Now we have an adjustment to make, all of us. In this recreation, we have some directives. This one is from Abdu'l-Baha. The world in the past has been ruled by force, and man has dominated over woman by reason of his more forceful and aggressive qualities of both body and mind. But the balance is already shifting. Force is losing its dominance. Hence, the new age will be an age less masculine and more permeated with feminine ideals. Or, to speak more exactly, will be an age in which the masculine and feminine elements of civilization will be more evenly balanced. To start with, then, in the creation of this new unity, it must be different from the past in that there can be no more male dominance. That's a first thing that we understand. There has to be a balance. Now, in past attitudes towards the morality between men and women, there were two aberrations. And if we look at them carefully, we can see both of them are partly an outcome of male dominance. One, in sexual relationship, in the expression of physical love, was indulgence. It's not news to us that there are all sorts of institutions that are created to satisfy immoderate male lust. Playboy, Esquire, all sorts of commercials, and not to mention brothels. And this has been through the centuries. Because man is more aggressive in nature than woman. When he has a sexual desire, it is accompanied with aggression. Therefore, the protest that women have been made sexual objects. Indulgence is not a path to happiness. Abdu'l-Baha says, this is a quotation, "Despair both here and hereafter is all you will gain from self-indulgence." This wrong relationship between the sexes can partly be cured. You know, we have to have a spiritual concept of man. We have to understand who we are. But in the practical day-to-day, inch-by-inch way that we climb out of a pit, which is the age of transition, how do we do that? Women are far more concerned in a sexual relationship with emotional closeness, with love, with knowledge of one another, with tenderness. Their nature must be expressed more than ever before in the definition of the right relationship between man and woman, husband and wife. If their needs were more attended to, there would be more tenderness, gentleness, kindness, and longevity in the relationship between man and woman. Now, there is another wrong relationship between men and women, which is asceticism. Fear of closeness, fear of sensuality. And I thought, where did this come from? If sexual love is part of human life created by God, why do we have a tradition of fear and revulsion connected with it? And one reason that occurred to me is simply it comes from centuries of male-dominated Christian theology. Christ never said, do not marry. But the Christian clergy developed celibacy as a way of life. If you would be close to God, stay away from women. Don't love women. Now, in that, I think, if you imagine living in an institution with only men who are tremendously agitated about getting to heaven, well, if you gave up the whole world, if you gave up everything beautiful and warm and comfortable, you were pretty tense about getting what it was all about, which is heaven. Now, no male society is calm. If you want the bulls to calm down, you send in a cow. In this environment, where the qualities of the feminine nature were lacking. And what are those qualities according to Abdu'l-Baha? More intuitiveness and more compassion. Now, the agitation that developed in these solely male places about what it took to get to heaven produced asceticism, fear of the world. Man is supposed to be strong and independent and achieving. To be close to a woman is sometimes to become aware of his need for tenderness, which frightens him. Or of his lust, which likewise frightens him. Now, Baha'u'llah adjusted that misconception in the human race. Let me find it. Seclude not yourselves in churches and cloisters. Come forth by my leave, and occupy yourselves with that which will profit your souls and the souls of men. Enter ye into wedlock, that someone may fill your place. You can find another trace of this wrong understanding of life in the way Eve was considered. In that same tradition of theology, she was the seductress, she was the temptress, she was the emblem of passion. Who corrected that? Abdu'l-Baha. In some answered questions, Abdu'l-Baha wrote, Eve is not the temptress, the seducer of man. The symbol of Eve is the soul of man. So in order to have unity in a family, we have to divest ourselves of attitudes in the past which have defined male qualities as good, in which fear and hatred of women, sometimes unconscious, played a large part in the relationship. See where I am. Now, the Baha'i teachings tell us the family is the microcosm of larger society. As we individuals seek to discover the right relationship, the right way to express masculine and feminine nature in a union which will nourish the children and contribute to society. We are also discovering how the society at large can be balanced. And I want to give an example of that. We have an example of a society in which the male and female principles were strongly alienated, and that is Germany, just before the First World War. You see, masculine principle needs the feminine principle, or it is at peril in the world. The excess in the female nature of compassion and intuition is something that life depends on. Look at the mother. Look at this symbol. With the embryo in her womb, she nourishes its life from her own life. If there isn't enough calcium in the mother's system for the baby, what happens? It comes out of her teeth into its bones. The new child begins totally dependent on the being of the mother and is nurtured with tenderness and care from its early life. Adults also need tenderness and unconditional love, and this comes more easily to the woman. Now, in a culture like Germany, where femininity was not honored, it was feared and despised. In that culture, the only social acceptable role was an extravagance of masculinity, strength, efficiency, performance, singleness of purpose. Now, how then did these men live? From where came their warmth, their encouragement, their hope? It was stolen from women. It was commanded from women. Women became servile. Hitler's statement is women are made for church because they didn't believe in God anymore, so they didn't care what she did in there. For kitchen, for feeding, and for children. She became drone-like, a servant, unthinking. Her warmth, her tenderness, her acceptance was stolen from her at night, and the distance between the two natures became vast. It is no accident that that is the same nation which went crazy in terms of war, which devastated Europe and which burned 8 million Jews. Because if you get an extravagance of one nature, and the male nature is the aggressive nature, and the female nature down, you get not only disorder in the family, and lack of warmth, lack of delicacy, lack of tenderness, you get the aberration of war and destructiveness in the nation. Now, there's something interesting about that. We have sort of what seems to me a Baha'i cliche. When we talk about balancing the nature of men and women, we say what Abdul Baha said, that humanity is a bird with two wings, and both wings must be fulfilled in order for the bird to take flight. What does that mean? In Germany, men became caricatures and monsters. The quality of masculinity, which is power, that terrific physical energy in the short run, the aggressiveness of mind that seeks a challenge, that became monstrous. What happened to mature women in that same culture? If you look at them, they're wearing puff sleeves and dirndl skirts and singing folk songs in the voices of a 13-year-old girl. There is no ripe femininity in that culture. Both sexes have become empty. They have not inherited their spiritual nature. In order to do that, they have to be in relation to each other. That was lost. So that men cannot be men except by relating to women. They can't fear them and seclude themselves or distance themselves without losing their own strength, their own capacity to create society. And women cannot give up their nature to become safe, dead servants without losing the potential of womanhood, to be alive, to be enthusiastic, to be warm, to be giving. So this historical example gives us an insight into how bad it can be if we don't follow our instructions, if we don't discover the right order. Well, let me just say this much. Each Baha'i family is a laboratory because the old patterns of relating are gone. If we begin with a sense of respect for both natures, and we meet the practical problems which we confront, in the course of solving those problems, we have a chance to discover some of those mysteries which Baha'u'llah said his laws were unveiling to us. So we have to begin as explorers. Now, a family includes the birth of children. And it is interesting to see how the birth of a child calls upon from the father and the mother the spiritual potential which is innate within them. The nature... Because of past conditioning and living in a society which is too strongly influenced by male values, and that's not my assessment, that's Abdu'l-Baha's, the two natures have different vulnerabilities. See, the man goes outside the home. His nature is to be an achiever, to accomplish, to find fulfillment in work or in something to do with the social world. He is vulnerable to restlessly endeavoring in that area for a kind of fulfillment that will never be found there. In an order which is declining and collapsing, it becomes impossible to invest yourself wholeheartedly and realistically in the institutions of that order. Our society recognizes power, status, and income. Well, if the male nature to achieve just fits into those things, it will be endless. You'll never earn enough, you'll never achieve enough, you'll never find a place of stability. You will either exhaust yourself as a workaholic or lapse into apathy. Will be one or the other. The nature of women, they are nest builders partly. They give care. The compassionate nature of woman specializes her to serve the family, to serve the child, to care for the man. She is now isolated. In the nursery, she learns language and she learns to form social networks. She is now isolated from aunts and grandmothers and any community that hangs together. Her vulnerability is to serve up more and more and more in the hope that someone somewhere, whether it's the boss in relation to the secretary or the husband in relation to the wife, will care and reward her. Both of those natures have hazards that have to be corrected in the Baha'i family. The birth of a child to someone with a Baha'i value, when you realize the physical well-being of the child is your responsibility, its intellectual growth and its spiritual development, calls forth from both natures a whole set of problem solving which enables us to bring this new creation into being and to adjust the male and female principle in the workshop of the family. I can give one example of that. In my practice, for instance, I will see women who for years have accepted servitude. They have said, here, if you want to put your foot down somewhere, try my face. This is the extreme of the feminine nature. Punish me and that shows you how much I love you. Into the life of this doormat-like woman is a child born. And the woman may be unwilling to tolerate for the child what she would tolerate for herself. And so she gets out of the too personal world that women can fall into. And she serves not some person with a hope of pat, love, recognition. She serves a principle of decency, human dignity, justice. How much more so if she is a Baha'i? If she is responsible for creating a spiritual environment, of giving to that child physical, intellectual, and spiritual health. So the birth of the child requires from the mother some assertiveness towards the things in which she believes. Ultimately, if she is going to protect her baby, she has to come out into society. She has to vote, because Abdu'l-Baha said peace will not be established in this world until women share decisions with men. So if she would be too domestic, too ingrown, the birth of the child and its care forces her to become more assertive and to be aware of the social world, which was traditionally the province of men. And how about men? Poor men, they created this disastrous society. It is so punishing. In a way you could say, hell is simply getting the chance to design the world the way you would like it to be. Because if you look at men and aggression and competitiveness, you suddenly look at the institutions of our society and what is wrong. Business life is so pressured and demanding. It is a constant power struggle. It is draining. If we only had to do the work of whatever our work is, deliver it to the people, it would be so easy. Instead, you have to worry about whether this decision is coming from that person because he wants your job. Does this memo mean that this person is trying to undermine it? It is total competition and struggle. And in the face of that, what do? We build tremendous defenses, because you have to move through that world without being broken or discouraged or mortally wounded. Well, friends, those defenses come home at night. There are many men who have to soften the iron-like armor that they have built around themselves with 4 cocktails in order to get their supper in. They live in an armored tank. It is fatal to be tender in that kind of power struggle. Well, in my office, I have seen such men who, in response to the birth of a child, are willing to risk loving something, who are willing to risk that daring act of vulnerability in order to cherish their son or daughter. How much more so the Baha'i man who knows this child is a blessing from God. And so the male strength becomes mellowed towards protectiveness, towards care. I'm supposed to end in 3 minutes? Okay. I'm simply trying to say that to develop a balanced family unit requires of us that we grow beyond our historical conditioning. And we will have to cooperate to do that, because none of us is capable of doing it on our own. Now, I want to mention one interesting thing, and that is that the images in the Baha'i writings give us the presence of both the male and the female qualities in God. You know how many prayers we have where we enter the court of majesty and bow ourselves before that king. You know, this is power, majesty, protection, wisdom. These are symbols in a masculine image. And then we are urged to draw from the breasts of loving kindness, the mercy, the forgiveness, the goodness of God, so that our image of divinity is a combination of male and female. There's no question that one isn't as important or isn't as included. Now that is meaningful because we each individuals have to become whole. And that is to say that men who are achievement driven by their nature, when they open the prayer book and say, whenever I consider my evil doings and thy benevolence, my heart melteth within me. In order for a man to mellow his strength towards tenderness, he has to forgive his shortcomings. The poor monks struggling for salvation had it wrong. It's not by becoming perfect that you are saved. It's by accepting your imperfections, daring to open yourself to an incredible tenderness. No man who's afraid of the tenderness of women is ever going to approach the tenderness of God. A Baha'i man approaches that tenderness every day. How much more comfortable is he going to be with the other human creature whose nature is specialized for that quality? And what do women say? We say some assertive things in our prayers. We say, I have held fast to the cord of constancy. I have turned my face nowhere but in the direction of thy face. We have proclaimed our determination to serve no human agency but God, to not remain in our own little nest, but to serve humanity. So each individual in his relationship to God, we don't have to fear power, and we don't have to seduce power as Baha'i women. We call upon it. Thou art that all-bountiful one, the all-powerful. It is our friend. We don't have to fall into a power battle. A brilliant book has been written, I think, about what is an epidemic cause of divorce in North America. The title of it is Passive Men and Wild Women. And it simply diagnoses one of the things that's breaking apart families, because in the stress of the culture around us, tremendous pressure for men, achievement pressure, total destruction of social relationship bonds in which women's nature finds much of its meaning. The husband and wife face each other, except they don't face each other because the man holds up a newspaper or looks at the television set or goes out and builds a tool shed. And the woman is saying, if you loved me, you would talk to me. Please spend a little time with me. And into all sorts of offices comes this tremendously combustible mixture. What happens is the two natures are different. The stresses of society are pressing on them. And so the man, exhausted, thinks that emotional closeness means there's something else he's supposed to fix. the woman cries in this poor man, the performer ethics that he's been steeped in, he is supposed to fix it. Well, friends, in the age of transition, that is impossible. So up goes the newspaper. It is dangerous to be close. It is to simply experience failure. And the women are wild. They are wild for closeness, emotional closeness in their sexual relationship, talking about the kids, sharing is a great need. Now, they have to not flood the man with that need. We have somehow got to build a unity out of understanding and respect for each other. And that means curbing the full force of a lot of female emotional expression, which paralyzes the person that you would like to have rubbing your back. I mean, there's no hope in this clash. What we have to do is look at each other as explorers in the age of transition, to appreciate our own natures, to let them develop fully in prayer to God, and then to be patient, supportive, non-competitive, and not driven apart by the stresses of society. Now, we have an assistance, and that assistance is the Baha'i community. You see, we're all traveling. We're all looking for ways to do this. No woman's needs, emotional needs, can be completely fulfilled in her own family. She has to have a broader community that care about her, not as an object or as a servant. That should be the Baha'i community. No man can get the full fulfillment of social achievement in a society which is in a state of collapse. What you would build one day will tumble down the next. But in the building of the world order of Baha'u'llah, investing in those institutions, there is a lasting fulfillment. Now, I'm speaking in generalities, and it's overdone. There was no tenderness greater than the heart of Mr. Faily. Tenderness doesn't belong only to women. There was no boldness greater than Martha Root's. How many times did she go around the world alone? So I don't want to overstate the differences. We have to look at each other as unique and as explorers in creating a new kind of unity. Now, what do the professionals say? How can we save families? Where are the models? Where is the support group? We have an answer. We have models. And I'd like to end my talk talking about a different kind of family that we are all part of. Abdu'l-Baha wrote to many American believers about their spiritual family. He wrote to Mae Maxwell and to Juliet Thompson. He said to Juliet that Mae Maxwell was her spiritual mother. If you read those letters in the selections from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, so many times he says, don't grieve if your human family don't understand the Baha'i faith. You now have a spiritual family. Spiritual family bonds are deeper than blood bonds. And we, the Baha'i community, are spiritually united. For all of us, there are brothers and sisters, there are mothers and fathers, and there are children who have no biological relation to us. We can give to them of ourselves, and we will create a family. And we have models. You know, Rahia Khanum tells us in The Priceless Pearl that she loved her mother profoundly, and that when her mother died, Shoghi Effendi said in his words to her to bring her some consolation, Now I am your mother. Well, let us claim our spiritual family. Let's be fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters. And I would like to do that in closing. You know, I went to Harvard, which was a real male academic place. And I remember one time a professor who said that he noticed that one of the things women did was personalize everything. If you talked about anything, they looked into themselves. He said, in fact, I know a joke about that. I was in an anthropology course one time, and the professor said, women tend to personalize things all the time. And then a Radcliffe girl sitting in the front row said, Professor Gardner, I never do that. Oh, okay. Even in the area of knowledge, Abdu'l-Baha encourages women. And Baha'u'llah says, and this quotation is given to us in the House of Justice letter, Baha'i scholarship must learn a way in which knowledge has the quality of milk. Milk comes from ladies. Even in the area of knowledge, we won't have wholeness and balance unless we learn the capacity of milk to nourish something carefully, gradually. Well, okay. So this man said women personalize. Well, for those generation of women at my time, we went to these male institutions. We were interested in learning. And if we were bright and clever and quick, we were accepted. We were almost as good as men. We could think. We could organize. And when we heard a joke like that of how women personalize, we sort of felt self-conscious. We hoped that nothing about this inferior feminine nature was going to leak out like this, to be discovered, to embarrass, and to humiliate. Well, let me take this female quality. It has an extreme. It has the kind of vision that can never look beyond what will be good for me or my children. That's an excess. But to personalize things also has a dignity and a place of respect in any religion which believes in the independent investigation of truth. Because one place to understand if something is true or false is within your own experience. So let me be personal. Let me claim my Baha'i family. Well, I have a fantastic mother. She is called Tahira. Her boldness, her radiance, her eloquence were the marvel of the age. And Baha'u'llah himself extended his protection over her, which I think is the rightful place of male power, to protect that which is tender. Twice, at the Council of Badasht, when she claimed the independence of the revelation of the Bab, she was later criticized, and the Bab said, "What am I to say about the one whom the tongue of grandeur has called the solace of the eyes, the pure one," the name that Baha'u'llah gave her. When she was imperiled in her home by her own family, her rescue was arranged and planned by Baha'u'llah. She was brought from Qazvin to his house. Her boldness, I pray, is the mother of my actions. I have two fathers, and Mr. Khadem, with his eloquence, with his infinite patience, with his rich sharing of the qualities of the East, has illumined my life, encouraged my mind. And Dr. Mahajer, with that matchless combination of meekness and majesty, of humility and power, has fathered my spirit. And I have a brother, a black man I've never met, but about whom I have heard. He was in the South, teaching and teaching and teaching too many hours each day. And the people around him said, "What are you doing, Amos? What are you working so hard for? You're going to kill yourself." Well, he had been to a lecture which described the duties of the people of this day and how Baha'u'llah said if we failed, he would raise up the stones of the earth to proclaim his cause. So when they told him he was doing too much, he said, "I don't want to be overtaken by no stone." And I have a sister, and she also I have never met, Christina Hakim Samandari. Her father was shot in the hospital he founded. He had returned from Europe to Tehran in days of obvious danger because the institution which he founded was no longer serving the poor and the elderly, and he was struck down. Now that was a family of tenderness and closeness, and in such a short time after the funeral, where she surely mourned the loss of that father, she took her grief and made a bold decision. She would come to travel teach in Quebec, and in the name of her martyred father, she would speak in towns and cities and villages and television stations and radio. And her gift to her father was teaching the faith of Baha'u'llah, an irresistible spirit. A family tells you who you are. Our Baha'i family tells us who we are. So I call upon Tahira, upon Mr. Khadem, Dr. Mohajir, this black brother, this matchless sister, to help me through the difficulties of the age of transition. Now, Abdu'l-Baha said women's nature is tender. We will never win in a power struggle. We are the more compassionate. He said, if woman is to achieve her station, she must be encouraged by men. Her tenderness must be welcomed. The men must say, "Blessed are ye, blessed are ye." And I thank the Baha'i men in my family who have welcomed my mind, who have protected my tenderness, who have encouraged my service.